Are you a bit confused about the choice of your next Apple laptop? Because one of the biggest questions in tech right now is whether or not to go for the 14-inch MacBook Pro or the 15-inch MacBook Air. And if you're asking yourself that question, it might be good to ask yourself why you're asking that question. Because on the face of it, these machines are totally different with different case uses. The 15-inch is a lightweight wonder capable of cutting through any day-to-day tasks such as writing essays, emailing, web browsing, watching movies, etc., without ever stressing out with its silent, fan-free design. People finally have the large screen real estate they've been craving whilst on the go and without the weight. While the 14-inch MacBook Pro is a pro machine, meaning that even the base model is pretty well loaded for anyone who wants to carry out creative tasks such as video editing or photography. And even though it does have a fan for active cooling, you might well never hear it kick in because of the good old M chip. So why are people lumping these two particular machines together when it comes to making a choice of their next laptop? I think it's because in lots of areas these two machines overlap. First of all, let's look at what has become one of the most important considerations when buying any laptop, and that is weight. And I think that's because a lot of us, myself included, now associate the word lightness with modernity and the best in technology. And if you are going to be lugging one of these things around all day, it better not add any more money to your chiropractor bills. There's no doubt about it, the 15-inch MacBook Pro is the lightest 15-inch laptop in the world, but when you compare it to the weight of the 14-inch MacBook Pro, it's not that light. The base model 15-inch comes in at 1.51 kilograms or 3.3 pounds, while the base model 14-inch comes in at 1.6 kilograms or 3.5 pounds. And believe me, having owned both of these machines now for a while, there really is no noticeable difference when it comes to weight. Now, most of the time, my 14-inch MacBook Pro remains on my desktop as the beating heart of this YouTube channel, but when I do take it out and about, I have to keep reminding myself that I have it on me and remember not to throw my bag around too much or drop it on the floor. So when it comes to weight, I can put your mind at ease slightly and tell you that there's so little difference between these two machines that it really shouldn't be a factor when it comes to making your decision. Here are the dimensions for the 14-inch MacBook Pro. And here are the dimensions for the 15-inch MacBook Air. But it is the difference in screen size between these two machines which is probably causing you the most indecision. And here you have to ask yourself what it is you really want from that extra inch of screen real estate. Are you going to have loads of tabs and windows fully open on your desktop at any one time? Do you absolutely need as much space as possible for working on the go, as this will be your principal machine and you won't be plugging it into a monitor all the time? And putting size aside for one moment, what about screen quality? Now, the Air might have a 15.3-inch Retina display, but there's no support for HDR or XDR, and it has a peak brightness of 500 nits. Whereas the Pro has a 14.2-inch liquid Retina display that does have support for HDR and XDR, and a higher native resolution, making the image much sharper and cleaner from the get-go. Now, while it might have the same peak brightness of 500 nits for standard definition content, it can go between 1000 nits for constant XDR and a peak brightness of 1600 for HDR. In short, the sheer depth of contrast and colour richness provided by XDR and HDR technology, together with the 120Hz refresh rate, means that the screen on the 14-inch is way superior. What it lacks in size, it more than makes up for in quality. And because I've been using it every day for the past 18 months, when I opened up the 15-inch for the first time, it felt a little strange, as if I was looking back at old technology, which in a way, I suppose I am. But once again, it has to be said, if you are going to use either of these laptops plugged into an external monitor most of the time, is screen quality really going to be that much of a factor in your choice? Now let's look at power and storage. The base model of the 15-inch comes with 8GB of unified memory and a 256GB SSD. The base model of the 14-inch comes with 16GB of memory and a 500GB SSD. Now, 16 gigs of unified memory is undoubtedly better than 8GB, especially when it comes to creative tasks. But when it comes to the storage memory of 500 gigs on the 14-inch, that's more of a sort of safety blanket for me because I mostly use external hard drives anyway. Now, not only does this free up important day-to-day space for operating memory, apps and things like that, but it also means that if my computer does go down for any reason, I have my project safe in a second place. And I absolutely refuse to pay for Apple storage because it is eye-wateringly expensive compared to just buying some external hard drives. Now, while the 15-inch only has a 256GB hard drive, I'm sure that many people who use this machine will have a lot of their work stored in the cloud. And if you only do written work, unless you have tons of apps on this machine, that hard drive is going to be fine for you. Now let's look at convenience, and by that I mean ports and expansion. The 15-inch MacBook Air is not very good on this front, with a MagSafe connector, 2 Thunderbolt ports, a high impedance headphone jack, and that's it. Let's say you suddenly get the urge to do a simple bit of video editing, or work on a few photos from your mid-range DSLR. Wouldn't it be great to have the convenience of an SD card slot? Well, you don't have it, so you'll have to buy a dongle, and keep misplacing it or leaving it behind at home. Or let's say you have to make a really important work presentation relying on a dongle that might or might not work, depending on the monitor you're plugging into. If only you had the security and stability of a good old-fashioned HDMI port. You see where this is going? The 14-inch MacBook Pro has a lot more to offer in this regard. With a MagSafe connection, 3 Thunderbolt ports, an SD card slot, a HDMI port, and a headphone jack. This little powerhouse covers all the convenience bases and with hardly a dongle in sight. And finally, let's look at the most important deciding factor, and I think that is value for money. Now, this category might be the one that seals the deal for you, but not necessarily in the way you might think. The 15-inch MacBook Air is a relatively new machine, and as such, it's quite hard to find deals on it outside of the Apple Store. That will of course change in the next year with deals on Amazon and second-hand machines coming onto the market. But because the 14-inch MacBook Pro has been out for quite a while now, you can pick up some amazing second-hand deals or new old stock, sometimes only paying a few £100s more than you would for a brand new 15-inch MacBook Air. And here is where I sort of make the decision for you. So even if I weren't a YouTuber based on value, convenience, power, and even size, I would always go for a second-hand 14-inch MacBook Pro over a brand new 15-inch MacBook Air. It has the ports, the power, and the Goldilocks size that I have just come to love in the last 18 months. And if in the future you should stray into a moderate pro workflow, it's got all your bases covered. Also, I find the chunky design of the 14-inch MacBook Pro quite reassuring in some way. It just feels like a machine that isn't going to let you down. However, if you absolutely insist on buying the very latest model from Apple, here in the UK, the 14-inch MacBook Pro costs a staggering £700 more than the base model MacBook Air. So there you have it. Either go for the previous generation 14-inch MacBook Pro at a knockdown price, or if buying new, go for the Air. Simple. Problem solved. Still confused? Well, only you know what you're going to use either of these machines for, but might I suggest that if you are still umming and ahhing about whether or not to buy a Pro machine, the chances are you don't need it. But either way, let me know how you're feeling about your potential purchase. Which laptop are you going to go for and why? Just let me know in the comments down below. And if you are still making your mind up, then why not check out my reviews of both of these machines? And if you've enjoyed this video, then please subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.